producer Amy. And I should mention that Andrew is an acting teacher, actor, director, and playwright. Prior to moving to Asheville, Andrew ran Green Church Studio in Chicago, a private acting studio specializing in classes in the Meisner approach. His students have gone on to air on stage and screen in shows like Stranger Things, At Beale Street Could Talk, a whole bunch of other stuff as well. And he's joined with us today with Susanna Turner. I want to put you on the spot, Susanna. This is going to be your big Asheville debut. You have about 45 minutes to give your background in 45 minutes or less. But give us the Reader's Digest version.
Sure. Well, my name's Susanna Turner. I just moved here about a month ago. I'm an actor, so haven't done a lot of acting yet in Nashville, hopefully to embark on that. But yeah, I did some Meisner training at Green Church Studio, and hopefully down the road, teaching if possible. But yeah.
Okay, and the question I usually ask performers, I'm going to ask this of both of you. So when you were a little kid growing up, did you grow up in Chicago?
I didn't, actually. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin called Marshfield.
Okay, move the mic a little bit closer to your mouth there. That'd be great. So you grew up in Wisconsin. You grew up where, Susanna?
I grew up all over the world, actually. Born in Colombia and lived in Southeast Asia for a bit.
Okay, so the question I usually ask, especially actors, when you were growing up in a little town where you were and all over the world, did you always know you wanted to be an actor?
I really did.
Did you really?
I really did. In fact, my I think 7th grade acting teacher / director of shows from my junior high just last week actually posted footage on Facebook of me in a play called Toby Tyler. When I was in the 7th grade, I guess, what is that, 12, 13, something like that. I might have always knew that I wanted to be an actor, but boy, oh boy, could you not tell from the video that I just watched.
Well, the question is, was that the first play? Do you remember the first play?
That was not the first play. The first actual play that I did, I played, oh man, this is embarrassing. I played Foxy Woxy is the name of the character in like a summer, it was like a kids drama camp production of Chicken Little, the story of Chicken Little. I played the bad guy. I got to like peek out from behind the curtains and give like a knowing wink at the end of it, and like eaten all the other animals basically.
Now, was there a tape anywhere of this?
I really, really hope not.
Yeah, because I have this great idea. I want you to think about this, especially as you come into the Asheville area, is that what I want to do is have everybody do their first play. In other words, so we could revisit it. You could have our mutual friend Robert Dale Walker could do
Sure.
his first play.
Absolutely.
And wouldn't that be cool as a fundraiser? Everybody do a 5-minute thing. And you do your first play. They could revisit
It's a
this.
good idea.
Wouldn't it be fun though?
Absolutely,
Something like
yeah.
that. And this is going to be your first entree into the Asheville area. I'll help you with it. But you could put this whole thing together.
Sounds great.
So you get to do the first play, and we'll keep a permanent record of it. Same thing too, Susanna. Do you remember the very first time you ever acted?
Yeah, the first time I ever acted was actually in it was in Islamabad, Pakistan. I played a guard in The Wizard of Oz. Not a big turnout, definitely, but yeah, that was the first experience. And then going to college and studying acting at Green Church Studio, and then that's when I definitely immersed myself in the community.
Do they have a record of that first performance also?
They do not.
Okay, so here,
Thankfully.
well, Andrew's going to put together here. You're going to have this chance to revisit this, and everybody could see this.
Yeah.
Your very first performance. So you guys then started, Andrew, certainly as a young age, maybe you as well, Susanna, and that's when you got the acting bug. You just knew you wanted to do this.
Yeah, I mean, for as long as I can remember, I've always gone and seen a lot of theater. My parents took me to a lot of theater. My dad actually took me to a production of Cats in Washington, D.C. when I was like 6 years old. And once I got over the terror of cats, or people dressed up as cats walking down the aisle and sort of interacting with us in the audience, I really loved it, and sort of kept going at it from there. And I've always very much been sort of a film buff, and somebody who's interested in that world as well. So, yeah.
It's funny, Cats scared my daughter. That was one of the first plays I ever took my daughter to. and she was scared by it.
Yeah.
It's like the movie looks scary too.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
On all sorts of other levels, for sure.
It's uncomfortable.
That's my feeling.
It
Do
really
you
is.
want to see it?
No,
I probably don't.
I have no interest
I
in seeing
kind
that.
of really do, actually. I mean, I think part of the reason is I want to. I mean, it feels like it's all coming full circle, you know. But also, you know, it's got an amazing cast and such a weird concept. I mean, Judi Dench is in it,
Right,
and,
exactly.
Yeah.
and Idris Elba. Although somebody told me that like Idris Elba, even as a cat, manages to still come off as really, really cool and really, really good.
Well, I hear too something I just heard the other day. They may delay the. It was supposed to open Christmas or
Oh,
something,
really?
and it may be delayed, which I guess isn't a good sign. Or,
Probably not.
But okay, so you won't be in Cats. So you saw Cats, but you won't be in Cats.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be in it. No,
did-
not one of my favorite shows.
Did you ever want to be a cat?
I mean, I have 3 cats, and I love that. You know, no, I never really wanted to be in Cats. I did want to be in Phantom of the Opera. That was like my dream role for about like 3 or 4 years. I thought that would be really cool. to
Were
do.
you ever in Phantom of the Opera?
I never was. No.
But think about that. Coming to Asheville, your big opportunity.
Right?
Let's put on a show. You
Why
know,
not?
like let's start a school. Let's start. At school. Like that could be. Think about that. That could be the graduation ceremony. That they're in this school studying acting and then they put on a play.
You know, absolutely.
Okay, talk a little bit about that. So that you had the bug. Did you study acting in college?
I did. So I acted all through high school, and then you know, as I think all parents probably rightfully do. You know, my parents were like, "Okay, so you've got the acting stuff out of your system. Like, now what are you going to study?" I got into UW-Madison. I grew up in Wisconsin, so UW-Madison was it was a cheap state school, and it was a good place to go. And I sort of said to myself, "Okay, great. I'm gonna do something else that I think I would enjoy," which was going to the education program. And I lasted about like my first semester in the education program. But in that first semester, I also took not an acting class. I actually took a backstage class because I was like, well, if I can't act, if that's not practical, maybe I can at least be around theater and do that. And then very quickly, it was just very obvious to me that I didn't want to do anything else as badly as I wanted to be involved in theater and acting, and so I switched up my major in my sophomore year, and I got into the acting specialist program at UW, and I've been acting ever since. I went to DePaul University for my MFA in acting. I started in 2006 and graduated in 2009.
So teaching's loss is acting's gain. Is that?
Yeah, well, I somehow managed to integrate all of those interests and teach acting and teach theater, and also found myself in a situation where I can still make it too, which is, I think, kind of the dream.
And Susanna, the same thing too in terms of your background. Did you study theater?
No, actually, I studied psychology. The first time I got introduced to acting was I just was living in Chicago, and I biked past Green Shirt Studio, and I just figured, okay, let's take a look at the website. Saw the website, loved what they had to offer in terms of Meisner and how they talked about Meisner in a very authentic and I guess very supportive way for actors and non-actors. And then once I took a couple classes there, I just was like hooked. That's when it started for me. So it started after college.
And since then, have you done some acting?
Yeah, so I've done a couple short films and quite a lot of auditioning, which is the work.
Of an actor. Well, listening to you guys reminds me of. I enjoy the show, The Kaminsky Method. Have you seen that?
I have watched like 1 or 2 episodes. You started watching it a couple of.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just reminds me though of this guy starts an a little acting studio or something. That's sort of what you're moving into. Is that correct?
So, I mean, I in Chicago for the last 10 years, I ran a studio called Green Shirt Studio, which Susanna's mentioned a couple of times. And that, I've been teaching, really it was my pretty much full-time job, nights and weekends. I had sort of multiple full-time jobs, really. But pretty much every night of the week and every weekend day, all day, I've taught acting for the last 10 years. Specifically the Meisner approach, which is something that I sort of specialize. But really, it's acting is acting. It's about the way into the thing that the Meisner approach is sort of my specific way into this thing that lots of other methods teach. But I've really been teaching for the last 10 years, and now that I'm here in Asheville, I got set up with, as you mentioned, our sort of mutual friend, Robert Deal Walker, who's a great guy and a great artist. And he also happens to have studied teaching the Meisner approach with my same mentor who taught me, a guy named Larry Silverberg, who we took a 2-year certification program with. And so now that I'm here in Asheville, and Robert and I have sort of met and like each other, and seem to have a very simpatico kind of approach to what we want to do, we've put together some workshops and some classes that we'll be beginning to teach here, hopefully in the new year.
Let me ask you this, Andrew, and I'll ask Susanna from a student standpoint. But the idea of being acting, it's something that you can learn how to act?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something that I feel very strongly about. I think there's a lot of times, there's this idea of talent as being something that's very important for an actor, that you see somebody who is, naturally gifted, naturally talented, and there is some truth to that, but everybody has the capacity to be an actor. The question with talent is, people with talent tend to be socialized in ways that sort of help them act, and people that seem, at first maybe less talented than others have been socialized in ways that keep them from being able to act, in sort of free kind of ways, that, free, truthful ways that we all think of as great acting. I absolutely believe that anyone can act. I really do believe that.
Well, Susanna, the same question in terms of learning to act. I mean, you must have had an interest in the field or thought it'd be kind of a cool thing to do. But have you learned to act? Have you learned how to act as a result of some of your classwork you've had?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I mean, I agree with what Andrew says about how anyone can act. I mean, what Green Shirt teaches hopefully is to, you walk in the room and that's it. You need to just bring yourself and do the work. For me, myself, I definitely do feel that I've been able to incorporate the work learning from that school out into my real life, which essentially helps me in every single way. So, yeah.
Had you ever thought you were going to be studying this? What brought you to decide you wanted to become an actor?
Oof, that's a big question. I would definitely say the work of Meisner. I think if I was introduced to a different type of technique that wasn't as welcoming or as focused on being vulnerable and open, it might have been different. But for me, it was being introduced to that technique the first time ever. No one in my family acts, so it's a little different.
I was going to ask you the same thing Andrew said. He had kind of an interesting comment that his announcing that he was going to be an actor wasn't greeted with welcoming arms, opening arms. How about on your end, when you said you were going to become an actor? What was the reaction?
I never really said it. I just kind of did it. My family's kind of all over the world. My sister lives in Saudi Arabia. My mom lives in Brazil. My family's just everywhere. So for me, it was always just like, just do it. And, I didn't really talk about it. But once finally I told my mom, hey, I'm going forward, full throttle, she was actually very supportive. She came around.
Has your mom seen you act yet?
No.
Well, that'd be cool.
No one in my family. I try not to talk about it a lot, just to be careful.
Well, and so hopefully they're not listening or don't watch on Facebook.
Well, no, they're like I said, they're in Brazil
Well,
and Saudi Arabia,
they
far
catch
away.
Facebook, though.
That's
but
true.
Andrew, back to you. So studied acting, became an actor. Did family reaction change at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think both my parents and my family would say that I was a pretty performative kid, I think. I mean, like growing up, I choreographed little dances, and you know what I mean? I did lots of that kind of stuff. I was definitely also very shy, which is sort of this bizarre thing about, I think actually a lot of actors, Dustin Hoffman talks about how he was very sort of shy and uncomfortable around other people, and Steve Carell famously too is a pretty shy guy and has a lot of stage fright. So I had this sort of weird dynamic where I wanted to be expressive, but it was also pretty scared and anxious sometimes, which a lot of my training as an actor has been about overcoming, is that sort of anxiety, or at least being able to turn it on and turn it off. But they have since seen that it's really the love of in terms of careers, it's like the love of my life, what I want to do, and sort of where I best fit in, and they've also seen that. In terms of teaching and in terms of, running the business that I've run, that there's also some viability in that side of things. So it's not just like the typical actor's life where you're, you get, it's feast or famine, you get a big job and then you're set for, if you get a national commercial or something, you get, you can live for 6 months off that paycheck. There's a little bit more stability in it for me because of this element of teaching.
Have they seen you act?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They were there for Foxy Woxy at the very beginning, you know what I mean? But they've seen me since then. They've seen, films I made, and they've seen shows that I've been in. I remember my dad came to see me in Hamlet. I played Claudius in Hamlet in grad school, and he came to see that, and I think they know that this is something that I've got some ability in and some certainly passion for.
Fast forward to now 2019, going to
Yeah.
2020 in the Asheville area, and you're bringing this Meisner approach to Asheville. And so I guess the first question, I'll play dumb, which is easy for me to do, but what is the Meisner approach?
So the Meisner approach is Meisner. The word Meisner refers to the guy who sort of developed over a long history of teaching a specific series of exercises. A guy named Sandy Meisner, who taught. He was a member of the group theater. If you're not familiar with the group theater is a group of theater artists who sort of emerged in the early 20th century in New York. And much of the reason for existing and coming together was they saw the work of Konstantin Stanislavski in the Moscow Art Theater, and they saw this new form of acting that now has become the ubiquitous form of acting that we all sort of understand, but is really actually pretty new. It's about 100 years old, this idea of realism. Which essentially, whenever we describe good acting, we think of it's truthful, it's honest, it's open. It's like the art itself, when acting is really, really good, it becomes invisible. It becomes a person being a person, and there's no, it doesn't feel performative. It doesn't feel like there's an artifice between this person's humanity and for lack of a better term, a term that I really don't love to use, the idea of character. There's really not a divide between these two things. It's not like an actor is putting on a mask to play a character. So anyway, Sandy Meisner was a part of this group theater, which was a very passionate group of people, including people like Stella Adler and Harold Clurman and Clifford Odets, one of my favorite playwrights, and also I said Stella Adler, right?
Yeah.
Great. So they were this part of this group, and they dedicated themselves to bringing this form of acting to the U.S. And they worked and they sort of modeled themselves on the Moscow Art Theater, whereas the Moscow Art Theater had Anton Chekhov, the group had Clifford Odets, and he would write plays specifically for the group to put on, and there were these realistic dramas, and out of that group, some great teachers emerged, including Sandy Meisner, and he taught at a place called the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York for decades. And he trained people like we have Jeff Goldblum and Diane Keaton and Mary Steenburgen and John Voight and Robert Duvall, and he trained many of the actors that we now think of as sort of the great actors of the 20th century. He trained.
By the way, something you mentioned, and keep this in the back of your mind, but I also love Odets, and I love nobody's. We have a couple people now bring back old shows
Sure.
to the area. I've been here now 10 plus years. Nobody's done something by Odette's, you know. So
I've directed two Odette's plays.
Have you really?
I directed Waiting for Lefty and I directed Paradise Lost.
how about Golden Boy was Odette's?
I love Golden Boy.
Yeah.
I haven't directed it. I love that show.
But think about that, because
Absolutely.
they've done, and I'll tell you off the air, a couple of theaters have done some classics, which is kind of fun. Because
Absolutely.
Asheville, Susanna, as you'll see, and you have your audition recently at Magnetic Theater, there's a lot of new stuff, you know, but it's kind of fun to occasionally bring back some of the
Well,
old
and
stuff.
if you hear Odette's now, Waiting for Lefty, I do that. I do a scene from Waiting for Lefty in my classes all the time. A scene between Joe and Edna, the two characters. It's sort of the one of the vignettes of Waiting for Lefty, and you hear it, and you know, whenever you read Odette's on the page, it sort of sounds like Edward G. Robinson. You know,
Right.
it's a lot of like, yeah, wise guys. See, you know, it's a lot of that. But then when you get underneath it, when you have an actor really, really connect to the words, it becomes absolutely modern and absolutely present day and contemporary. Edna in that scene says this thing like, she says, I'm tired of sleepless nights, and it feels on the page, it feels a little old-timey, and then you hear it, and you hear an actor underneath it, and it absolutely feels like, I know that feeling.
Well, as you talk about it, I can see in my mind John Garfield. You know, I just
Sure.
see I love John Garfield as an actor. But a challenge for Susanna, and you said so you're studying now the Meisner approach. How long does it take to learn the approach, or is there a series of courses, or is it just? Oh,
Yeah, definitely. So specifically for Green Shirt, I guess there's 4 levels, so it's 1 through 4. The whole thing overall takes about a year. You're also able to do what's called an accelerated program, which is kind of new, which it's 3 nights a week.
Well, yeah, I mean, in Chicago, when I was teaching Green Shirt, it was essentially there were the accelerator program, and I'm you know Green Shirt is not in Asheville.
Right.
It's a thing that's in Chicago, and it is yeah, essentially it's a 10-week program. But it was 3 days for 3 hours each day. And that was a really cool program, particularly people that wanted sort of an immersion in it. You can get, you know, essentially 100 hours of training in the course of 10 weeks.
I would say you actually get the best work out of the accelerated
Yeah.
program, just because you're going in and you're doing all the work in that short amount of time. You just gotta kind of show up and do it.
Well, I was going to ask you, Susanna, in terms of then, I was wondering if it's better to take it intensive, or you took it intensively?
Yeah, I did both. I did the levels 1 through 4 first, and then that was my first introduction to acting. So I kind of took my time on that, and then I was asked to come and do the accelerated program, and I got the best work just because you're in it 3 nights a week and you're just going full throttle.
How about a concern I know some people have, I know I would as well, that they kind of like acting or it'd be kind of cool, but they're worried about the memorization stuff, you know. Do you get into that at all?
Me personally?
Or both, and in your studies, they talk a little bit about how to memorize stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think for me, the beauty of what we learn at Green Shirt, I mean, it's not in Asheville right now, but my training is that we start with the fundamental basics, which is not memorization. That comes way later down the line, because in fact, there is a technique to learn how to memorize. So you're not learning it in a way that you would say it on stage. You're learning it in a way that it comes naturally to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, so memorization, I always say that it's the Achilles heel of the actor, because it's the first thing that will put you in your head. I can see it, as an actor and as a teacher of acting, I can see it when somebody hasn't done the work to get the lines in such a way where they don't have to think about them anymore. And so, and there's some traps. A lot of times an actor will get a script and they'll go home and they'll, in the bubble of their own room, they will sort of figure out how they're going to say the line, which of course has nothing to do with what's actually happening in the moment between that actor and their partner in the scene or their partners in the scene. And so there's a lot of traps when it comes to memorization. The first being that you're not memorized enough, and then the second being that you memorize in such a way that it like develops patterns. So, one of the things I always say in class is like, you get a line and it's like, good morning, right? That's the line. And an actor goes home and they look in the mirror and they say to themselves, good morning, good morning, good morning. They repeat it again and again and again. And they try to figure out, how they're going to say the line, which is not, which doesn't have anything to do with what's happening. So, there are some tools that I teach in terms of memorization. One is writing it out by hand, for example.
I've heard that.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of great research actually that's shown that it does sort of drop into your memory in a different way when there's a tactile kinesthetic act attached to the memorization. So that's a really great way to memorize. There's some other tools too.
Yeah, I personally like throwing a ball around.
Yeah.
I'll just throw a ball against the wall and just say the words just as fast as I can, So you're actively doing something.
And that's a really useful technique because it also introduces a variable. One of the things that happens sometimes in a scene is that people forget their lines because something different is happening tonight than was happening the night before. They go, my partner gave me a different impulse in that moment, and the second I have a new impulse, all of a sudden the lines go. And so it's a vital thing to have to sort of practice and work on. The good news is, and this is true about the whole Meisner approach generally speaking, is that it is a practicable thing. It's the kind of thing that there are sort of nuts and bolts things that you build and you practice, and the more you memorize, the better you get at it. And the same thing is true with your listening, and the same thing is true with your emotional life and all of those sorts of things. It's a practicable skill.
And I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, it's a little bit different between theater and film for me, at least. Back in Chicago, when I'm represented by BMG Talent there, and they would send me on auditions, and the more I practiced the memorization, the quicker I was able to get it when I was being sent, 24 hours in advance, or a notice. That really helps. It really does, not just for theater.
Well, one of the things you gave me good advice off the air, you said not to do what I tend to do and put negative thoughts into your mind, So
Yeah.
if you say you can't memorize, you're not going to be able to memorize.
Yeah, you're just reinforcing that thought. It's kind of like everything in life. You just don't say those things, and hopefully,
Talk about, Andrew, in our remaining time here. Talk a little bit about some of the courses now you're going to be doing
Sure.
we mentioned the infamous Robert Dale Walker. You actually have offered a course, and you're going to be following up on that?
Yeah. So this past not this week, but the prior week, we just taught a free workshop at Attic Salt Theater. Not through Attic Salt Theater, but at the space. And we had about 14 students show up for that one night, 3-hour workshop, and had a blast. It was a really great thing for me. It was my first opportunity to meet some actors in the area in Asheville. And then on the 11th of January, we're actually offering another one of those, which is totally free, totally open to anybody that wants to study, and come check it out. No prior experience necessary, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. You do not need to know anything when you walk in that room. But also, if you happen to be an expert actor, believe it or not, you show up in that room, and I promise you'll learn something. Because it's one of those things that the work really does meet you wherever you happen to be. So we're doing another free workshop on January 11th from 11 to 2. And then in January, the following weekend, actually the following week, the Monday and the Saturday, we're going to be offering my first class in Asheville. So Monday night, I'm going to be teaching a class 7 to 9:30, starting I believe it's the 13th of January, and then Robert is going to be teaching a Saturday afternoon class that's going to be 11 to 1:30. And that starts, I believe it's the 18th of January.
And how long are these courses?
They're 8 weeks. So it's 2.5 hours once a week for 8 weeks. That's sort of our the introductory, the first level of classes. I'm modeling it very much on sort of what I used to do in Chicago, and Robert and I have sort of talked about structure and sort of matching up with what I used to do in Chicago.
And these will all be based on the Meisner approach?
Yeah, they'll all be Meisner classes. As I said, Robert and I trained with the same guy. to teach this work. So we're very much, we're very much in line with each other in terms of what we teach and how we teach it, and the words, the language that we use, and sort of the energy behind it. So those classes are going to be starting in January.
And so if folks then take those classes, then are you eventually planning to offer, as Susanna mentioned, the whole sequence of courses?
Yeah, I mean, the hope is that we, in this first round, that we get some good groups together, and then ideally we would love to continue to offer the fullness of the of a Meisner program here.
Now, do you also see yourself, aside from running these courses, do you see yourself doing some acting in the area?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually really excited about that. Running Green Shirt in Chicago was, as I said, it was, in addition to running Green Shirt, I also taught at the theater school at DePaul University, and I also taught and ran the theater program at Triton College, which is in the suburbs out there. So I had sort of very much full-time job, usually like 70 to 80 hours a week. So I'm really excited that now that I'm here, I'll have a little bit more free time and a little bit more ability to actually act myself.
And what's really cool, if your mom and dad are listening, or they can see us on Facebook Live, that you got back to teaching.
Right,
after
I know.
all
I
these
got it all
years.
back, right?
And Susanna, your plans are, I know you were mentioning off the air, you're doing some auditions, you're trying to get into the Asheville theater scene?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's my goal. I think back in Chicago, it was mostly focusing on film and TV, but my main goal this year coming up is to be on stage. So
So we look forward to seeing you.
here's
and
hoping.
We
Thanks.
look forward to seeing you,
Thank you.
Andrew. And I guess to wrap up, if folks want to get more information about either your upcoming seminars or other stuff you're going to be doing, best bet is to do what?
Yeah, so the best thing to do, currently we do not have any sort of website or anything like that for these classes, but anyone that's interested in either the workshop or the classes coming up in January, the 8-week classes, they can email, very simple, it's actingavl@gmail.com.
Okay, actingavl@gmail.com.
That's correct.
Do you also have a Facebook page?
We don't, no.
Well, let's talk
I
about
know,
that.
we ought to.
Okay, great. Anyway, I'd like to thank Andrew Gallant and Susanna, is it Turner?
That's
for being
right.
my guest this special edition of the BLAINESWORLD Show. I'd also like to thank my producer, Amy Biznash. Hope you join us at our regular time on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. on the station's website or Facebook page or wherever else you can find us. Anyway, I'm going to be going back to regular programming in just a second.